Hello, and welcome to Dead Ideas in Teaching and Learning, a higher education podcast from the Center for Teaching and Learning at Columbia University. I'm Amanda Irvin, the Center's Executive Director. In this podcast series, we explore dead ideas in teaching and learning, beliefs that, despite being untrue, continue to shape educational systems and practices. These outdated notions, as Diane Pike described, perpetuate the tyranny of dead ideas. Join us as we challenge these misconceptions and explore innovative approaches to higher education. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Dead Ideas in Teaching and Learning. This is a special bonus episode to close out Season 11. Today's episode is a little different from our usual format. Rather than a one-on-one conversation, you're going to hear excerpts from a live panel I had the privilege of moderating right here at Columbia earlier this month. The panel was part of a larger day-long event called Reimagining Teaching and Learning in the Age of AI. The forum was a collaboration between the CTL and our colleagues at the Columbia Data Science Institute, the Columbia Alliance Program, the School of Engineering, and Teachers College. The forum brought together faculty, deans, and students to grapple with one of the most pressing questions in higher education right now. What does AI actually mean for how we teach and learn? The panel you're about to hear featured 4 Columbia students. They represent a wide range of perspectives, academic disciplines, and comfort levels with AI use in the classroom. I have to say, moderating that conversation was one of the highlights of this season for me, because if there's anyone whose voice most needs to be centered in the AI and education conversation, it's our students. A quick note, because this is a group panel format, we aren't identifying each speaker by name in the audio, but a full transcript with speaker attributions and bios is available in the show notes, and I'd encourage you to check it out. Now, let's hear from the students. I am joined today by 4 students who will share their names, their majors, how long they've been at Columbia, sort of what year you're in, and then we will dive into some questions. So please.
Hi, my name is Praniti Sadhu. I did my master's at Columbia this year. I'm studying quantitative methods and data science.
My name is Stephanie Andrade. I am a Teachers College student and I'm currently in the Teaching of English program. I recently started in September, so I've been here about a year.
My name is Tony Din Ramos. I am a third year. I transferred in about last semester, so it's my second semester currently, and I am majoring in psychology.
Hi, my name is Jeanne Rojan-Coignat. I'm a French student in a dual degree between Columbia and Sciences Po, which is a French school. So I'm a junior, but this is my first year at Columbia, and I'm studying political science and human rights.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, as to kick us off, maybe we could just start with a general question about AI and the ways you've engaged with it as students. How has it helped your learning, or how do you feel like it might have hindered your learning? And to the degree that you could share examples with us, we would love it. Who would like to start?
So in my own experience, I've used, I am in the Teaching of English program, so I'm not only an educator and a practitioner, but I'm also doing my own research. So in my own history, I've used AI for lesson planning to see if there are any other practices that I can include to make my lesson more universally designed for students. I've also used it in my personal research to search up an author, right? An author can I get a list of authors that are adjacent to this author that would help my research or my research question. But I have worked with high school students that kind of just jump into AI and use it to write a complete essay, as we've seen.
I'm currently studying data science, so I think AI has actually played such a beneficial role. I came from a business background, so I was not as confident in going into a data science background just because of how technically dense it was. But with AI, I feel like it has given me the chance to use it like a tutor that doesn't get frustrated. That's kind of a metaphor I like using. I have so many questions about so many little terms, and there's things that even my teachers wouldn't be able to answer just because it's such a nuanced question. But the way that during a lecture I have Claude or ChatGPT on the side where I'm just asking it my small little questions so I can better engage in my lectures is something I've seen it really help me with. I also feel like I tutor, like Stephanie was saying, with teaching. And there are times where I'm trying to explain something to a student, but I'm not able to find the words or find an analogy. And because AI just is such a quick thinker, it helps me take those complicated thoughts and put it into simpler words. And it also has helped me with like a lot of little monotonous things, like with coding. Sometimes writing a function that I've written and I understand how it works, I know that might take me a lot of time, for example, with my senior thesis. But using things like Claude Code, I'm able to get that baseline code written down and then I can go in and debug it. So I'm still applying my skills and I'm applying my knowledge, but it's more of a crutch to help me save time and really focus my thinking where I feel like it could shine.
When you are in your classes, and I imagine depending on your degree program and the level that you're probably navigating a couple of different classes at once. So you have a range of perspectives, especially at this point in your career as learners. What are things that you wish, from your perspective, you talked a lot about the ways that AI has helped you or the ways that you have avoided AI. What are things that you wish faculty better understood about AI and the ways that you interact with it, or the ways, or it could even extend to like things that you wish faculty were incorporating around AI in their curriculum? You can interpret this broadly, but what are things that you wish faculty understood about AI?
I really wish that faculty would understand that we aren't using AI to stop thinking or to take the easy route. A lot of times in my classes, I feel like I get scared when I pull out my ChatGPT on the side because I don't want my professor to think I'm not interested. But for me, a lot of times it's a support. It's like a crutch to ask those silly questions that I'm not able to ask on the spot because there are so many other students, or in a classroom of 30 students where we're given 50 minutes to learn a pretty hefty amount of material. I don't want to waste the professor's time asking all my little questions, especially when I am when I can be very curious about things. So for me, AI is to honestly expand my thinking and go deeper into a subject where I'm trying to also be respectful of people's time.
As someone who is personally doesn't want to use AI, is against AI, I guess, in a sense, AI in and of itself as a technology is very intrusive into our lives, to the point where as a working student also, if anyone knows what Lionshare is, in their partnership with Handshake, it's like where you go to find work essentially. They did a partnership, and it was in my school email, was blasted to me of Google AI Pro, a free subscription. That was the tagline being "Start the school year strong." We're being marketed AI. It's not just the students being like, "Oh, I'm going to use this to undercut my education with how expensive tuition is." It's also a part of it being pushed into our faces, to the point where sometimes I'll try to use a search engine and I'll have to look at that AI overview that I don't want to see, which has muddled information for me personally for when I'm doing research. And I just have to ignore it and it just stays there. And you just have to deal with it. Part of it is, I think there's this perspective of students are doing this intentionally, or they go out of their way to do this, or oh, they want to use AI because it's easier, because it's better. It's some of us don't, and it's just shoved in your face to the point where you just have to bear with it.
I think that's something important, is that even though AI exists, it's important to maintain confidence between teachers and students. If we tell you that we didn't use AI, even though the tracker may say, "Oh, he used AI for 50% of the essay," maybe we actually didn't use it and the tracker is wrong. I feel like that's an important issue too, because it can affect the atmosphere of a whole class and how the whole semester, for example, is going to be. For example, I have so many of my friends at Columbia who have been accused of using AI because trackers said that they did, even though I know, for example, that they didn't because I worked with them or for any other reason. And so I feel like that's another danger. That's it can also affect the relationship between teachers and students, which shouldn't be the case, because I feel like we should believe each other more than believing a tracker that says that we are lying.
What my other colleagues have said already is understanding that what is the reason why your students are using AI within a class without your facilitation? There is understanding education and understanding students within their roles at an Ivy League institution. How does pressure play into the role of the use of AI? Right, as an educator now within the high school classroom, I see a loss of love for learning, right? Because of the pressures of I need to get an A. How do I get an A? ChatGPT and Grammarly will show me if I give them my rubric that this is technically what looks like an A. How do we move away from that in our classroom to prompt curiosity, to prompt trust as a professor, as an instructor with our students, to bring back curiosity into the classroom and being okay with failing and being okay with not doing what is deemed as correct.
Okay, interesting things that I hear happening as someone who's been able to benefit from the long view of our conversations today is that you, without knowing, have systematically sort of gone through and debunked some of the assumptions that we might have been collectively making in this space until right now. And I think that we were doing so with the understanding that we were painting with broad strokes, right? So the idea that all students are using AI, right? And you are saying that that is not the case, right? That you make the conscientious choice not to, or that if you are using AI, it's to circumvent thinking, right? But really, you're trying to enhance your learning and you're curious, and AI hasn't prevented you from being curious. Or this idea that you're seeking out AI tools when really they are being marketed to you, and they're being marketed to you in a big way. And that communicate, and we've known that communication is key. And one thing that you haven't talked about directly, but that I'm really curious to hear your take on this, is we earlier today had a keynote speaker who shared some data at a very national level. And there were this survey that was conducted at the end of last year, and the results were published this January. And it shared, I guess the general sense was like the reasons students use AI, right? And that some of them were very surprising and are in line with what you were saying, right? That they are there for folks who are learning English, and they've been encouraged by faculty to use AI tools or to answer questions or help them develop an outline for a paper. But some of them were about, I'll call it human connection or relationships. And the reason I'm isolating these ideas is because learning is relational, right? And in fact, the time that we spend together in person, like we are right now, is perhaps the most valuable thing that we can do when it comes to exchanging ideas. But that comes at a high cost. And you were saying, like, you've got 50 minutes, right? You've got 50 minutes, and there are 30 other students in the room, and you don't want to monopolize someone's time. And I will just tip my hand and show my age a little bit. Back in the olden days when I was in college, we had the internet. But if I had a question, I really had to go to office hours, right? There wasn't really a chat GPT. So I had to go and develop this connection and this relationship. And I'm not assuming that AI is preventing that, but I am curious what you see either in your own use or among your peers. If there are these emerging studies that students are using AI to offload emotional connection or relational learning, and that AI is becoming a replacement for that because it's so much easier to ask AI and get answers to your question than it would be to turn to a colleague or go to office hours. What do you think about that?
I think it's hard because in this day and age, there is just so much judgment and there's just so much stigma with like how you feel. And like, I think I see it with LinkedIn, like people just being so confident all the time. When you're someone that's insecure, you end up projecting in a way. And so you end up turning to AI. And I think that's just such a complicated field to navigate because it does help some people that feel so insecure, like build their confidence. But then also they lose the aspect of like pushing themselves and like making that emotional human connection that they're not going to get with a robot.
I believe that AI is the ultimate tool of convenience. It's this, you can get the same thing with just searching something up on the internet, but it's faster and more customized. And I think both for interpersonal relationships and for academia, that is a big issue because it's essentially just affirmation to the max. It will not just like, again, no, you won't get judged as harshly as if you're talking to a person. Let's be like, you're okay, but actually like this. It just reinforces you. And that's a big fear as someone who's studying psychology, where I hear friends saying like, I dealt with this by talking to my friend who's an AI chatbot. And that is terrifying because you won't get feedback. It just affirms what you say. That's the function of it. It's not thinking. It's a LLM. It's a learning language model. It's just repeating and saying what it thinks is correct.
As I mentioned before, how is this reflective of the human condition, right? What is prompting your students to, instead of going to office hours, as someone who holds office hours myself, a lot of you might know this, students aren't coming to office hours. Students aren't coming to in-person events. And this has changed after COVID, and the whole concept of the loss of literacy and, moving virtually. Everyone wants everything over Zoom, right? How is this reflective of your teaching practices, right? How are you being welcoming within the classroom? What is making your students scared of office hours, right? You might not be scary wearing a mask, like a Halloween mask, right? But sometimes TAs or interacting with other students, especially within the realms of the ivory tower, are very scary to students, especially speaking on behalf of first generation students. I'm first generation, I'm Latina, I have indigenous identities, and I'm proud of those identities. How are we questioning how students have to go out of their way to be able to learn? And how are we as professors and educators inviting students and to the knowing that it is okay to be wrong, it is okay to question, and it is okay to learn?
There's a question, since we're talking about AI versus in-person conversation, right? Whether it be with your classmates or going to office hours, which research demonstrates time and time again, office hours, according to students, is kind of scary. That's not new. That's not a Gen Z thing. That is across the board something that we've known for a long time. And so one of the questions that has come in is, in the classes, in your experience as learners, what have you seen, or what do you believe faculty could do to foster or nurture a classroom community about AI, or in general, to build rapport, trust, and belonging, right? So some of you have been talking about transparency, asking faculty to share their why. But what would help you feel like, and maybe another way to phrase this is, we were all talking beforehand about the ideas that faculty should partner with their students when it comes to figuring out AI. What does a partnership look like? What might faculty do to create a welcoming classroom climate where you feel like you can partner to think about what's the appropriate way to use AI in this space?
I think that, a big part of this is being transparent with the idea that making mistakes is human, right? I had a professor, I really enjoyed their class, and one of the things that they would do as a do now when we entered this lecture was have a question that we would all write about related to the readings, and then they would ask ChatGPT what ChatGPT thought, and we would enter a discussion as to whether or not we agreed with the answer given by ChatGPT. But also understanding that comes with making mistakes, right? Like sometimes my professor would mistype something and ChatGPT would give him a recipe for some reason. So being in those scenarios, in those settings where learning can be fun, right? Learning can be funny. Learning can be a place for dialogue and community. Whereas one-to-one AI is very singling. It's very individual. But how to bring that into the classroom, not necessarily in an assignment or not necessarily in a policy in your syllabus, but also just, playing around with it.
I think there's no other world where AI is going to be taken down for good. So we're going to have to learn to coexist with it. But I think understanding and trying to in a way, see how AI contradicts your thinking and also complements your thinking, thinking about both sides that was something that I think it really helped with, because it also makes you think. And I think a teacher wants you to think. They want you to explore and they want you to understand a concept. So being like, yes, use AI, but also try it yourself and see where you're comparing. See, okay, what gaps are there? Maybe there's something you can learn from doing that. Maybe there's something you're missing that you were able to understand from what we learned.
I think it's important for students to actually learn how to use AI because in the end, I think during our careers, we're going to have to use them. Because like, for example, during internships, I've observed people using AI. And so I know that I will have to use it. So I don't think banning AI from classes is useful in any way. I feel like we just have to learn how to use it and how not to use it. And I think that's something that can be interesting in classes to show students that you should not use AI in certain ways is actually showing like there are so many studies that show how it affects your brain, how it affects your capabilities of actually thinking, and how it makes you dumb in the end. And that's actually something I saw during a class this year. And I've used AI a lot less since then because you just realize that, oh, it's not just a feeling that I'm more lazy than I was before. It's facts. It's actually like damaging my brain, damaging my capacity of thinking by myself. And I think that's a way to actually show your students that you're not just against AI, but that's for themselves, that you're asking them not to use it.
This is really interesting, and we are tiptoeing our way, I think, into faculty use of AI, which we spent a lot of time talking about student use of AI. And there's a question that's been upvoted many times asking how you feel about the use of AI in grading and assignment feedback.
For example, when I got into Columbia, I was so happy because of the teachers that I was gonna get. And I'm like, oh, these people are incredible. I'm gonna learn so much from them. And if they start like correcting my papers through AI, I feel like I would lose a lot of, as you said, their experience and like, yeah, the benefit of having those incredible teachers would be just lost because of the use of AI and no personal opinion in a correction.
It feels kind of, feels a bit cheaped out if it's like, okay, I could just get a chatbot to grade my paper and it's the same thing instead of having the professor's expertise. So at least some involvement of the person that we're learning from or that we want to learn from or we reference. It would be like, it's a big part of why we're here. We're not just here because of, cool building. It's like, no, it's like we're here for the expertise of the people that we trust, we are learning from, that they know what they're doing, and that what we're learning here is important from the person that we're learning from because we're learning from these people.
So we have talked a lot today, and it has come up in the questions that folks are submitting about equipping students with AI literacy skills, because after you leave Columbia, you will go off into a world that is increasingly AI adjacent, perhaps even more than AI adjacent. And that workplaces, we had a panel right before this talking about workplace readiness and how crucial AI judgment calls or skill building is to moving beyond the university and into the world. And so I am curious, when we've been talking about AI in your classes and your use of it or not using it, or the ways that faculty are talking with you about it or not talking with you about it, when it is incorporated into a curriculum, do you feel like you're having conversations about like how this will benefit you going forward, or how the place of AI within a discipline, or when you leave Columbia, AI will be part of the career or discipline that you go into? And do you feel prepared in that way once you leave?
AI literacy is becoming one of those skills that you just have to pick up at some point, whether or not you plan on using it, don't want using it, or will use it, just because it's going to be, and it is currently being integrated into our lives at such a rapid pace that it's kind of hard to not be and just be left unequipped. Because like, even if you don't want to, at least knowing how to handle it will help you in that aspect as well. Knowing how it can be applied, how it can't be applied, how it should or shouldn't be applied based on personal merit, but also in terms of a workplace. It's not something I don't think that you could skip over anymore. The same way as like how many years ago did you not have to know how to make an Excel spreadsheet? But now it's just like, okay, learn how to do it because that's what you do. Like I used to work at a resource center, and we offered classes in that, like learning how to use the Microsoft Suite specifically because it was such a core part of getting a job at some point, and in very specific jobs that just demanded of you, regardless of if you're like have a computer at home. Not everyone does, but having this like suite of skills, like including coding, that's another thing that's becoming more and more a relevant life skill these days. It's just knowing how to do minor coding, how code works, how to fix it up. And a part of that has to do with AI because it's becoming so relevant these days. So I don't think there's a way around it, but having to be literate in it, at least in an academic sense.
Especially back in France, it was totally forbidden. And in here, in most of classes, it's the same. So I've never had a class in which I really had to use it. I used it because I feel like everyone does it anyways, whether it be for research or to ask questions for which I didn't have answer. And as much as I would love how to use AI and how it'll be useful in my future career, I feel like it's also hard for teachers to try to teach it because everyone is learning at the same time at the moment, and no one really knows what's going to happen and how it's actually going to have to be used. So I think we all want to know more, but no one can actually teach it because no one knows enough to teach it properly.
Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspective. Today and even the last few years have demonstrated that Columbia is an institution that's dedicated to thinking through AI and reimagining what teaching and learning looks like in the age of AI, and always with this student experience at the center, right? The whole idea is fostering learning and providing students with an environment where you can thrive. And we can't do that without your input and your perspective. And we get that in a lot of ways. This is just one of them, but we are so grateful to you for joining us today. Please join me in thanking our students one more time. I hope that conversation resonated with you. Our team at the CTL has certainly been sitting with these insights for the last few weeks. What strikes me most listening back is how honest and generous these students were. Pranati described AI as a tutor that never gets frustrated and is patient in a way that can feel hard to find elsewhere. Stephanie talked about how AI can be used to introduce playfulness into the classroom, a space where many students feel overwhelming pressure and performance anxiety. For Tonydin, AI is becoming commonplace. He believes we should teach AI use as a skill, which can be used ethically and thoughtfully, and not as a tool for offsetting intellectual work. Perhaps what moved me the most was the thread that emerged around trust. Jean noted that if faculty assume students are using AI when they're not, it damages something. And Tonydin said directly, I came to this university for the expertise and insights of my peers and the faculty, not for AI. As we move forward in this conversation together, I think these are all insights worth sitting with and thinking about how we can respond to keep students at the center of teaching and learning. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please review our website where you can find any resources mentioned in this episode, ctl.columbia.edu/podcast. Please like us, rate us, and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Dead Ideas is produced by Stephanie Ogden, Lauren Close, Michael Brown, and Sarah Carswell. Our theme music is In the Lab by Immersive Music.